Ladies and gentlemen, please notice that exits are conveniently located at the front and rear of this auditorium. When leaving the theater, we suggest that the exit at the front of the auditorium will allow you easier access to the parking areas. Thank you.
Corey Feldman does not know how to eat a freaking pizza.
Do free plugs during the show?
I also do a video game podcast, so it's probably true.
Hey guys,
Hey, yeah, I got a lady coming over. Maybe you got a
got
a couple
get a
beers.
sixer. I think I got a sixer. And away we go. That's a new thing I'm working on. When you always love that, let's just leave questions.
I don't
walk right into that.
There are some. I'm not saying this is a good movie.
Oh, what? We've just lost 90% of our young audience out there. Who's Susan Lucci? I don't know why they're an old lady voice, but anyways.
And he'd be like, oh, yeah, exactly. So many viewers. We just lost so many. Never once did I smile. Never once did I laugh. While I watched this movie with my mouth agape, I could actually feel my soul leave my body. You heard it here, folks. Mike Field is dead inside.
That's Wally soul. That's Wally soul. I want to do the secret cabal stuff. I don't want to just go and drink.
You still got to wear a cloak and stuff.
No. I want the real cabal stuff. Like I want the stuff where we're controlling the world.
I want the signet ring. No, you're gross. You know you're gross.
I
would love to do a James Bond podcast.
I'll do it right now. Cancel the other podcast you do.
You son of a... You get the hell off this podcast.
Let's take it to the limit one more time.
Nothing.
You done? Story elements, Butler. Story is a great thing. Is what we're doing. You're telling me a story
here.
He hasn't. He's still leaping, but he's not home yet. All right. They just need to do the episode before everyone dies.
Ziggy. Every episode we do is just a lead up to Forgotten Horror. Keep it spooky, y'all. Yeah, I get it. Can I get an interview about Betsy's wedding? No, anything but that.
Get lost.
Anything but that.
Get my hat. I was gonna say, like, the whole point of Star Wars is to get him to shoot those friggin' things to kill the Death Star. You're telling that's the whole design of that movie. This is war, Marcus.
Oh man, he reads a lot. He's such a learned man. He's so great. He's so much better than everyone.
He is, right? Look at that review.
Oh my god. When Jesse Eisenberg's name popped up. Jesse Eisenberg? No.
Who did you think played the brother? He rebels against maturity by taking a job at a movie theater. Oh no, I'm sorry, that's me. At a video store.
After brutal dumping. No, that sounds terrible.
after I took a brutal dump. That angers me that he can't fold that pizza.
I had the same note.
But until then, I guess we'll see you later. I'm Mike Field.
I'm Mike Butler.
And this has been the Forgotten Cinema Podcast. Suck it up. Hello, I'm Mike Field.
And I'm Mike Butler.
And you're listening to the wrap-up episode of the Forgotten Cinema Podcast.
Each episode, we highlighted a film that, for a variety of reasons, was forgotten by audiences. Whether it was because a more popular movie was released at the same time, or the film simply didn't catch on with an audience in its initial run.
We discussed what we loved about the movie, or perhaps didn't love about it, but we always recommended you revisit it.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. Our podcast is available on all platforms with over 200 episodes to remember us by.
My God, we're dying. What's going on?
Nothing. I'm out of coffee. I'm out of podcast episodes. I got nothing left.
Out of movies. We still have the big list.
We do still have the big list.
But I would delete that note immediately.
What, the big... Oh, the podcast. I got to transfer the big list.
So I don't know how we want to. I got a bunch of questions that people ask us and then we'll answer. I don't know if you want to do those now, or do you want to do those at the end, or do you want to just kind of go through some thoughts or whatever? Yeah,
maybe we'll just go through our thoughts and like intersperse the questions as we go.
Okay, so give me something.
So I guess because no one asked us what was the favorite movie you did. We've done.
Oh crap! I don't know we're gonna do that.
We talked about doing that.
I know we did. So you mean like the movie that?
What was one that you hadn't seen before or only saw like you didn't remember that ended up being one you really liked, and what was your favorite? Because I think those are two different. Because obviously I have one that obviously you put on the list that I really liked, but then I've got movies I like.
I mean, you're talking Stranger Days. Well, here's the thing though. I've seen a lot of these films.
Right.
So it's kind of, I don't know. There weren't a lot that I hadn't seen. I know I didn't see, off the top of my head, I know I didn't see Trilogy of Terror. A lot of the movies I had seen. So there weren't a lot of movies that we went back to, and I don't think I really like, oh my God, I can't believe how much I like that. I think I always like the Coen Brothers films. So when we did a lot of the Coen Brothers movies like Miller's Crossing and Burn After Reading, I just appreciated them more because they were Coen Brothers films. But like, I always liked those films. There wasn't one there was a couple that were just like, I hated. I think my favorite episodes, I don't have one, but I think my favorite episodes that we do are the episodes where there's a lot of interesting behind the scenes stuff that we don't know about.
Sure.
Like I'm thinking Cursed off the top of my head, just kind of like understanding like what happened with films and maybe why they weren't successful. I can't remember the movie Event Horizon, where I never knew the note that Titanic completely derailed that movie. And you never really think about that. You just kind of think about, oh, this movie stinks because this, not because they were forced to get into production faster because Titanic was late. And, you know, that's the movie that Paramount that cared about. Was it Paramount?
Yeah.
Universal?
Paramount.
Yeah. They cared about Titanic more. So you never really think about that.
Yeah.
I always have an affinity for independent films. So when we did like Two Family House, you know, so stuff that's smaller, I always love. And I probably do give it a little bit more of probably
a break.
Yeah. I think Living in Oblivion, when we did that one recently, I've always loved that film, but I didn't have a problem with it the second time around. I like that you liked it a lot. Yeah, I don't know. When we first started picking movies, it was just kind of like, oh, let's do this one, let's do this one, let's do this one. Then as we went along in the seasons, it was almost like, I don't remember if I like that. Let's try that film.
Right. Yeah.
I know your answer is you loved Strange Days.
So Strange Days is not a perfect movie.
No one says it is.
In like the movies that we watched that I had never seen, which there were definitely more of those for me than you. I think that's one of the first one. That was one of the ones that really stuck with me the most because I like the fact that it was like unfindable. So
True.
that was interesting.
That which we had a problem with. That's a theme throughout the podcast. Was 90s. Yeah.
I liked that it was right up my alley in terms of that kind of near future kind of. Demolition Man is the only one coming into my mind now, but there's a ton of movies like that where it's like, this is 1999 and the movie's like made in 1997 and they just think in 2 years the world's going to basically be like a shithole. But I really liked the way that they imagined the future. I liked the technology that was presented. I liked Ralph Fiennes as more of a hero or like a film noir kind of like protagonist instead of just kind of the person in the background or the mentor figure.
Sure.
And I just kind of like the way the story kind of panned out. So I like that episode. I liked that we're going over a movie that maybe a lot of people couldn't see. But you know, obviously movies that I love when we're talking about The Nice Guys and stuff like that, just because they're such fun movies.
The only problem with those are the episodes I like the least when
it's just us gushing about how good the movies
we make all these quotes and we're doing, and I get it. It's kind of cool if we're just sitting in the back office saying that stuff, but it doesn't make for good podcasts.
Right. But episodes like, I think like we just did our last, like conspiracy theory, like going over what went wrong with the movie is very interesting. And again, that usually, like you said, happens when it's movies that we didn't know or remember not liking as much. But even like other episodes, like I liked when we talked about episode 2, Tarzan is an memorable episode because we talk about, and Burbs too as well, what worked in the kind of the same way.
Sure.
So those are also kind of nice. It's like, we like Tarzan, but a lot of people don't. But here's why you should go back and revisit it. I like those in terms of, hey, Tarzan was just kind of shrugged off.
Right.
And it's like, it's a great adventure movie. You know, it's filmed really well. It looks really nice. It's got a decent story. You know, those kind of things where we go over that are the Burbs. Why the Burbs, which people seem to like, but it's always forgotten as like one of the 80s class, like the gems of the 80s. Or 1408, where it's a movie that I remember really liking. and then it's not good. Like Sphere, obviously, our first episode, which we're not going to put out.
It was a test episode.
The test episode where I remembered really liking it, and as we talk about it, I'm like, I think I don't like this movie at all. The same thing kind of happened like 1408. Watching it again, this director's cut actually absolutely destroys the movie. And that's one you had never really seen before. And so you watched a sucky version of it. So it's interesting to get your take and me kind of agreeing with you, but like knowing that there was a really good movie in there that we'll just never get to. And obviously it's nice to have like House Party or Romy and Michelle's high school reunion where, the people that were part of the movie actually liked it.
Right. Mike's referring to, we had like on social media when we posted about them, like Kid and Play liked the post and followed us. And I think like Mira Sorvino liked their commercial, which was, it's cool. That's like a neat thing.
And then also one of our episodes with Martin McDonough liked our podcast episode, and he mentioned us. Hey guys, we were like,
no, not Martin McDonough.
Was it
Neil LaBute?
Neil LaBute, yeah. Neil LaBute liked it. So I thought that was really interesting.
The Shape of Things. Yep. I liked when we did the 70s movies. I liked when we did like 3 Days of the Condor, The Conversation, even Bird Offerings, like the older films.
Those were good too, because I had never seen them, and it's fun to, or not, I've seen some of them, but it's fun to see like where some of the stuff comes from.
Sure.
When we go over like Burnt Offerings, what worked and what didn't, what was a product at the time.
Sure.
3 Nights of the Condor, or Days of the Condor, you see where the spy genre came from was always really good. And then The Conversation was just phenomenal. And I would never have seen it without Forgotten Cinema, because I think that's another thing is like why we do the podcast, obviously. But people my age, even people that are into film like I am, it's kind of like the older movies are ignored. And I know you just went on a big 70s kind of binge watch.
Oh, sure.
Recently.
A Hot Rock.
Catch up with a lot of the ones you didn't get to see.
Yep.
And like you said, like Living in Oblivion, Red Rock West, going over like that 90s semi-independent filmmaking of like, this is people like learning to make these movies, and you can see these people kind of getting to the point where they are now today is really interesting.
Yeah. Well. I mean, I've obviously, we both experienced indie filmmaking. So I think that's probably why I have an affinity towards indie filmmaking, just because it's done in earnest, and they're not all perfect, like we said, but it's still something like what
they can do is commendable.
What they're doing. Yeah. So let me get to our first question, and then So this is from Laura Johns from Why the Book Wins podcast, which we were on her podcast a couple times, and she was on ours once, right?
Once, yeah.
We did In Bruges with Laura. She's asking us, why are you stopping? So that's a loaded question, but I've got an answer, but do you want to go?
Because Field's got a lot of other stuff he's got going.
For me, I think it's just time. When we started this podcast, we were both working at the theater. We were just sitting there. This was before the pandemic. It was 2019.
Right. Yep.
I was unfulfilled. I'm sure Butler was as well. And Butler, I remember I'm like, we should just do a podcast. Let's just do it. And I was like, fine. And so, but it wasn't like that. But I was like, yeah, all right, okay. And then one of my things, and Butler knows this. One of my things is like when any kind of project, short film, writing project, anything, I don't like starting something and not doing it. Like I wouldn't say, yeah, let's do a podcast, and then like 5 weeks later, we're done with it. You know what I mean? Like I would, you know what I mean?
Right.
Just, yeah. So like, I'm hesitant to start a lot of stuff because I want to see it through. So that's probably. Which is
why I wanted to do a podcast with you, because I knew that because Elise and I were going to do a podcast, my fiance, just because she was going to Connecticut School of Broadcasting. So it was like, I want to get that practice.
Yeah, she was supposed to edit her episodes.
Yeah, she was going to edit her episodes. And she's like, wanted to get, have stuff to show people when she went out looking for work. And it's like, all right. But then I didn't think that would last too long. So it just seemed like not a hobby, but like kind of like, I want to show people I can do this for work. And then when she got something, it would go away.
Right.
And I was like, well, I want to do something. Because we had talked about it even before that. Maybe doing so, like, there's podcast. Like no one does podcasts about.
We were talking. Yeah, we were talking around it. Yeah.
So like I knew that if I started a project with you, it would actually happen, because you and I are of the same mind in terms of, like you said, we want to finish something and get a project done. And a lot of people in the kind of independent creative space talk a big game, but then no one kind of agrees with the subject to do, or don't follow through, because it is difficult to put something on. It's like, this podcast isn't easy to make.
No, and it's
a decent amount of work.
And you're putting yourself out there, and you're putting yourself out there to be critiqued and criticized in a good way or in a bad way, whatever.
And watch the views. And we both did our research and knew that I think it would take a long time to get a decent amount of views.
Sure.
Which hence is like 4 years into the podcast.
Well, that's why we started. But why we're stopping is that now 4 years have passed. We both were laid off during the quarantine, during the pandemic. That kind of kicked me to start a freelance career. came back to theater, started working part-time, but I was always writing. I was always working on stuff. I got another job, and I wrote a book that I want to, like, this next year, aside from other things, it's like I really want to kind of work on the book a little bit more and start writing more. And this is nothing to do with the podcast, but like the new job, the podcast, everything going on, it's just like my time's being sucked away. And the one thing, and I've always told Mike, is that when I'm not writing, I get upset. Like I'm just like, I sit here and stew because I'm not writing.
Absolutely.
And that bugs the crap out of me. So I nothing is forever. And I think ending the podcast the way we want to is something that not many people can do. I think a lot of people are either end because we fight, we get into a fight, or
people just drop off.
Right. You fade away. Like I could have easily just been like, I could have easily been one of those douches who's like, I got a job, buddy. Sorry, I just don't have time. I just don't have time. Like, you know what I mean? That's not me. That's not you. So I think ending it it took us a while to get to this point of being like, we need to wrap it up.
Sure.
But I think once that decision was made, I think it was just like, it felt like the right thing to do.
Yeah.
I don't know how you felt. Like, why are you?
Once the quarantine
I didn't talk him into it.
Once the quarantine happened, which was, I mean, terrible for the world, but I think great for you and I, because it gave us time to work on creative things. I started narrating audiobooks. I started doing some writing as well. And just like you said, when you don't create, it gets a little depressing for creatives like you and I. And it's like, this podcast is great and it's a little bit of an outlet, but at the same time, you're itching for other stuff. I had not as much freelance work as you, or it didn't pay as well as you. But, I went back to the theater. I was still full time, but I was super unfulfilled, super depressed all the time. I mean, now I'm depressed because I'm poor, but I'm working on creative stuff, which is fulfilling. And this podcast does take a decent amount of time to do. And, I want to get into the YouTube space. I want to do more narration.
You're a creator.
Voiceover. Yeah. Talking about movies is great. But then we talk about, like, especially when we talk about some of these independent films, I'm like, I want to do something like that. I want to be in that world. Like, there's nothing stopping us. Like, if we put our mind to it. And I think that by stopping the podcast, we get to do more. And we even talked about maybe not even stopping the podcast, like podcasting all in general, but we can use podcasting as a creative outlet at one point in time.
Well, that's what it was. That's what the commercials became.
The commercials became a way to do that. And then we talked about doing narrative fiction podcasts and stuff like that. And it always became, but Forgotten
It's just more time.
Forgotten Cinema is here. So Forgotten Cinema is taking it up.
Yeah, absolutely.
So by putting Forgotten Cinema away, Field can publish his books. I can do some YouTube stuff. It's not even like we're going to necessarily stop collaborating. Field has the possibility of doing his he's got short films possibly in the works at some point in time down the line.
Sure.
We always talk about the narrative fiction podcast. But again, by doing stuff like that, we can also bring in other creators and take some of the load off ourselves and also invite other people into the creative space.
Sure.
Which is nice. So I think all that kind of stuff kind of bubbled over into the podcast. And the podcast, while it's a decently going podcast, has never really grown. We got to, I think, our stopping point as a podcast.
I think a lot of podcasts people who don't do podcasts may not understand this, but a lot of podcasters will. It's like, it's tough. You're an independent podcast. You're not a name. We're not a celebrity. So we're not getting big guests. You have to break through. And we kind of came towards the middle when everyone was doing podcasts. And I think the fact that Butler always says, I don't know if he says it on air or off air, is that most podcasts don't get past 50 episodes.
I say that
we're over 200. So I think it's a success. I think that not only did we manage to maintain a weekly schedule, 1 week we missed because
we just didn't think anybody would listen.
Right,
we were going to skip holiday weeks at first.
Well, then we just kept pumping out. That's when the 10-week cushion came in, and then we started doing commercials. That's something that separated us. But one of the things that in my job, but it's like, does that ever come out to views? Like, everything that we do, is that really gaining us views? And we've tried a lot of stuff. We guested on other podcasts. We had other good podcasters on ours. I did an interview. It's just, I never really, it just didn't. But I know I'm saying, like, it just didn't pan out, but I don't view this as a failure. I view this as a success. 4 years of podcasting. I think we've got
thousands of listens, and I think that's pretty good. It's just, I think we've hit like you said, we've hit our wall. And I think that doing the same thing over and over again and not being able to stretch that creative muscle is probably the main reason we're stopping.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean like possibly one day we can come back and do like a Forgotten Horror or something, or
we're recording this in December.
Yeah.
In a couple of weeks, we're going to be guesting on another podcast for the Pint.
Yep.
For an episode for about Blue Thunder.
Blue Thunder.
So I imagine you're going to still hear us on other areas.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're still going to be working on the Forgotten Entertainment stuff. So if you listen to some of those other podcasts, those are going to be there, and possibly some new podcasts down the line. So the Forgotten brand isn't going away.
Sure,
technically,
just us.
But we're going to fade into the background.
All right,
like the Homer Simpson.
All right, so let's get to some film stuff.
Okay.
So Joe Doherty, who we guested with on the Pints, one of the Forgotten Takeover ones, right?
Yes.
I can't remember the episode. Toys? Was it Toys? No.
The X-Files.
The X-Files, right. He asks, what are some of the movies on your list you'll regret not covering? And then which directors who have made at least 2 movies do you think are forgotten? All right, I'll go first. So the movies that on the list, we'll do the movies one, that I'm going to regret that we never covered are Tron Legacy, because I love Tron Legacy.
Tron Legacy is great.
War Horse, Charlie Wilson's War, the extended edition of Needful Things, which I was really hesitant if we could ever get. Children of Men, Signs, because I just talked about Signs, Contact, Mr. Mom, and Fury. And only Fury because I saw it the other day. I was like, damn, I like this movie.
I remember not liking Fury that much.
No, I like it. Well, go ahead. What are some of your movies? That you regret that we're not going to be able to sit down and talk about?
I think I'm going to regret not doing Blank Man, because I think that would have been a really, really hilarious
That's
episode.
why this podcast is ending. I couldn't do Blank Man.
I think that would have been a really funny episode, even though I know you don't like it. I think doing Casper would have been interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I should have done it earlier as a kid's movie, because there are so many adult moments within that movie that I think would have been perfect for us to talk about. And I think that David Fincher's Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is an underrated movie that I would have liked to do, as well as Tron Legacy.
But I like the original Dragon Tattoo, so that would have been a good back and forth. I probably would have watched both films. Yeah, and I probably would have compared. Okay, so what directors do you think are forgotten that we don't talk about enough?
I think Mel Brooks is forgotten to a modern audience.
Oh yeah, that's true.
I think he's criminally. I know Blazing Saddles is, at least when we're recording this in December, is in the news because some people are in Twitter are debating if it's
hilarious.
Culture. No, it's hilarious. It's great.
Just get rid of that.
And all of his films are amazing. And I think that we're having this discussion, but it's all people that are 35 and up.
Yeah.
And I think younger people haven't watched any Mel Brooks stuff.
Agreed.
They probably maybe know the name of
High Anxiety,
know Spaceballs,
Bride of Frankenstein.
Yeah, but they don't know them.
Young Frankenstein, not Bride of Frankenstein. Young Frankenstein. Yeah.
They haven't actually seen them, so I think he's kind of forgotten as a director. Sure. I think that John McTiernan is kind of forgotten as a director.
I know.
I think people know his movies, but he's criminally underrated as a director.
And he's a criminal.
Well, he
not by his own. Yeah.
He was an example. He was made an example of.
He's still a criminal.
But he's a great director who's done so many classic films, but you don't know, it's not like this is a McTiernan film.
Mm-hmm.
It's a Bruce Willis film, or it's just an action film, or,
mm-hmm.
Predator is just Predator, or a Schwarzenegger film.
Yep.
But that's kind of interesting, is that he's done so many things and no one thinks about we just did Conspiracy Theory with Richard Donner.
Right.
But people know Richard Donner.
Right.
Very few people, I think, know, it's a McTiernan film, other than people that are really into film. So I think he's kind of underrated. And then we've talked about it before. Martin McDonagh puts out amazing films, and I don't think he's given the credit that he's due. With 3 Billboards, Banshees. Well,
I'm not
when this comes out, we'll see
fan.
what that does. But I think these films are highly rated and talked about. And In Bruges, obviously,
they're well written. He's a really good playwright.
He's a great writer.
Obviously,
he's got great actors in it doing really great things. But I think that he's not given a lot of credit either. Maybe.
Sure. So I had a couple. So this is going to be weird, but I'm going to say Jon Favreau, and not Jon Favreau that directed Iron Man. Jon Favreau that did
Chef.
Made, who wrote Swingers, did Chef. When Made came out, I always said if he just did these small films.
Did he direct Made, or did he just write Made?
He directed Made.
Okay.
If he just did these small indie films, I'm not going to be obviously begrudge his career. You're going to go get the big money, money.
But now he's pretty much in charge of Star Wars.
And that's fine. But his smaller stuff is really, really good. And I think that nobody remembers that. Chef is such a good movie.
He never did a follow-up to Chef. Not just Chef, another movie.
Maybe he just needs to kind of that needs to come to him, that kind of film. But I like David Koepp's directing. I know he's a great writer and he's written big films, but we did The Trigger Effect, we did Stir of Echoes, we did Ghost Town, we did 3 films right there. But I would say go check out Premium Rush, even go check out Mordecai. I know people don't like Mordecai, but it's actually not as bad as people think.
One of the movies that I should have put on what I want to do was Secret Window.
Secret Window too. I like Secret Window.
Hated Secret Window.
I know.
But it's when you told me it was David Koepp, I was like, no.
Yeah. I mean, I just think he's always known as a great writer. This is David Koepp, but he's a good director.
Yeah.
And I think he's overlooked. I like Paul Greengrass.
The Ghost movie is is a really
Ghost
good
Town?
movie. Ghost Town.
Yep.
Would have been is up on the list on my favorite episodes we did. So I'm glad I watched that movie.
You know, I love Paul Greengrass. I love United 93, Bloody Sunday, Captain Phillips, The Bourne Ultimatum. That's one of the movies, like when Bourne Identity was Doug Liman. And then the second one came out, Ultimatum. I'm like, wow, I really like this film better than the first one.
I love Ultimatum. I think Ultimatum is just amazing.
I love Richard Linklater. I think that, you know, he's somebody that, like, you don't go, if you go through Richard Linklater's career, you'll probably think like Dazed and Confused. And that's great. But like, he does so much stuff. He's so prolific and he just cranks out movie after movie, but nobody talks about him. But if you go through his filmography, you'll see the movies that he's done and you'll be like, I didn't know he did that. I didn't know he did that. I didn't know he did that. And you see the people that work with him. I really think that people don't talk about Richard Linklater enough, but maybe that's what he likes. So this is from John Amenta from the Pine Podcast. John, I know what you're trying to do here, right? What was the film you liked the most during your listener's choice season, and which was your least favorite, and who chose them? So John's trying to have us cause trouble here, and that's fine. So season 5, we did an audience choice, and we basically put out there, hey, pick a movie. We're going to pick from them, and we're going to do them.
Right. So
this was the first time that we didn't control the content. So one of the film, the from that season, the one I liked the most was The Man from U.N.C.L.E., which was I had a couple. The Man from U.N.C.L.E., which former employee Zach Goodridge suggested to us, Butler.
Yep.
King Creole, which I didn't think I would, because I'd never seen it.
Yeah, it was an old movie.
And that was G.I. Gary, who does some, I guess he does his own YouTube show, but he also does stuff for The Pint. I always love Clue. So my mother suggested Clue. So I still loved it. And then I actually, your buddy, Aaron Singleton, suggested Juice. I remember liking Juice, but I don't like
Juice.
Right. But I remember when we watched it, I was just like, I really like, there was a lot of stuff in the movie that I had forgotten about that I really liked and dug. Those are the ones I liked. What are the ones you liked? We'll get to the dope. We didn't like.
Man from U.N.C.L.E. and Clue, I definitely liked. Silent Running was interesting to watch because it was so old.
Another 70s one.
Yeah.
Which your mother suggested?
My mom suggested that one, and it's not great. But I still wonder, like, is that just because it's of its time? Or there things that aren't great because it's time? But you can definitely see the birth of like Star Wars and Battlestar Galactica.
Oh, Douglas Trumbull. Yep.
So that was really cool. King Creole was really good. I thought I'd be bored trying to see like, when does it end.
It's one of our better commercials.
It is. I like that commercial.
Yeah.
Go and 11-14 are interesting because it was interesting to see that there are 3 different movies that are mostly vignettes.
Yeah.
I think I liked 11-14 better than the other ones. So I kind of liked a decent amount of them, but definitely Clue and Man from U.N.C.L.E. ones I like really dug.
So the 2 that I didn't like or I couldn't connect with, I shouldn't say I didn't like, it's a toss up. Butler Hates Folks. The one with, who was in that? What's his face? Tom Selleck. Right. Don Amici, right?
Yes.
And that was suggested by Steve and Christina from the Super Retro Throwback Reviews podcast.
Yes.
But we talked to Steven about that afterwards. It's like, we just didn't like it. You know,
it happens.
Yeah. It's not,
I've picked out films that feel hated as well.
I mean, the whole point of this podcast is to have a discussion about films. It's not, you know, I'm right, you're wrong, or and for the sake of the podcast, we do over exaggerate our arguments. You know what I mean? Like,
I don't know. For Folks is one of the worst movies I've ever seen.
Well, but that is your opinion.
That made for a really good episode.
Oh, absolutely.
Because neither of us would have put it on the list.
That's absolutely.
So it was interesting to kind of tear apart why it didn't work.
But the other one I didn't like was Uptown Girls, which was by Burker Fanar, who probably never listened to the podcast after he suggested it. I could not stand Uptown Girls. Yeah. I don't know. What's up?
Leek Jarn is what he goes by on YouTube.
I don't care. I was not a fan. Maybe Uptown Girls was my one that I didn't like. But again, these are just our opinions. Who cares?
Uptown Girls wasn't for us.
Yeah.
And then I think The Phantom.
No, you're just saying The Phantom was John suggested it.
Because he's waiting for us to say it.
Well, here's the thing. John thinks The Phantom is like Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's okay. It's
not great. And it's not better than The Shadow.
Oh, yeah. John, also, here's the other thing. So go over to The Pint. John thinks that the Phantom is better than The Shadow, which is ridiculous. But again, these are just opinions. They don't matter. Nobody cares. Everyone that suggested, I thanked. That
sure, it was interesting to see
and it was cool to do something that we didn't pick, and it was out of our hands almost.
We didn't keep doing it because I don't know if we could have kept up the podcast if we kept doing the things people chose.
So if we get to the next,
Clay Pigeons was interesting too.
Yeah.
I liked Clay Pigeon. Wasn't great, but it had that same like Red Rock West indie feel.
It was that 90s indie. Yep.
I kind of appreciated that, even though it wasn't great.
So this isn't a question on a thing, but I'm going to ask you this because I brought it up with the King Creole. What is some of the favorite commercials that we've done?
Ooh, I love our. I can't remember the name of the movie. The vampire one.
The vampire one.
The Colin Farrell vampire movie.
Oh, Fright Night. That was the first one we did.
I love our Fright Night commercial. Hey, guy.
Yeah.
It's just so awkward and uncomfortable. And you just kind of like are. I think that's some of our best acting between the two of us and the closing the garage door. And I think that started off kind of the Butler Field characters in the commercials.
Yeah.
I think just from that commercial alone, we were just like, yeah, this dynamic works, where it's kind of like a Rick and Morty type situation.
Yeah. So like I'm the jerk off and Butler's the
doofus.
Yeah, doofus, but like the kind of like the hopeful doofus kind of thing. Yeah. I mean, some of the commercials, they change up. I think there was we were doing different things. It's always like me, you're doing something and I'm always like, really? Like I'm making a comment on you or something, or I'm messing around with you or something like that. Like I love the King Creole one has that element at the end when I'm like, yeah, go dance, and I run off. I like that because I was black and white. I figured out how to do that counter thing and had that audio thing. There was a lot of stuff I was doing, in the background for that. Sure. So I thought that was a good one that we did. Trying to remember.
Well, in that case, the
Night of the Hunter one.
Oh, the Night of the Hunter one is great. That's
singing.
Probably Elisa's favorite. Just because I'm also hoarding the toilet paper, which I thought was really fun.
Right. So like that's the other thing too. There was obviously, because the podcast was going through the quarantine, that we had a series of commercials was just like we were quarantined together. So we had like a series of stuff going on, which I thought was funny.
The one with where you're on the other side of the glass and I'm doing the monologue from
Sneakers.
Yep. And you're just like, come on, Butler, I just sneezed, let me in.
Yeah.
And I think, I should put Clue as a top commercial as well.
Mm-hmm.
And Clue, people come to me all the time and tell me how much they love the Clue commercial.
Oh, good.
Because Clue commercial just gets ridiculous. It just builds and builds and builds from like, I can't be beaten in Clue, which is stupid as it is, to you hitting everything off the desk and saying, pick it up. And then you with the wrench at the end and then me still guessing that you're going to kill me.
Yeah.
I just recently went through all our commercials and watched them all. I did like a whole marathon one night on YouTube.
Nice.
And I was actually laughing at some of them. Some of them are really, really funny.
Yeah. The Minority Report one where I'm yelling at you.
The Minority Report's pretty good.
Yeah.
The New Jack City one.
That was so funny.
I was laughing at that one just because it's so like
dumb.
You just killed 2 cops, Butler. Like, you throw the bag of cocaine at me. I was like, this commercial really goes hard, and then you have the gun in my face. I'm like, we really went for it in this commercial.
Well, and then the ones we did in the booth, like in the theater, like when the one where we were throwing the football around for one of the sports
hitting
movies,
the balls, hitting the head.
Right. That was like when the one where like there's nobody, like that scene. I like when there's nobody in the lobby because we're basically saying the theater's dead.
Hey, we can't do this. There's going to be customers around.
Yeah.
And we just look in the lobby.
Yeah, we started laughing. We did a couple of those commercials where we're referencing how bad the theater was because nobody was coming to the theater during the pandemic.
The walkie-talkie phone, the watch one.
Right. The one where New Year's where you're counting down, like it's going to be the year of Butler. And then
someone threw up in the lobby.
Yeah.
And
so it's funny because a lot of the commercials were about the movie, but they also were reflective of what was going on in our lives.
Right.
Working at the theater. We kind of phased off at the end because we just don't have time, which obviously leads to why the podcast is ending. But
the last commercial was about, should we keep doing?
I love the poem. I love the poem one should have been our last one because I'm like, oh, this is the perfect ending.
The poem one was the last one.
No, we did another one after that. We were in the back of the car.
Oh, that's right. Yep,
so, but yeah, no, I would say, what would you think if I said to you we did 100 commercials? Do you think that's accurate?
I would say so, probably for like half of them.
Because we stopped. I don't know if I would think we did 100, right?
We definitely got close to it. We did quite a few out of the 200 episodes, 208 episodes we did.
All right, I got another one for you. Another question. This is again from Laura Johns from Why the Book Wins. Who would you say is your favorite actor and actress of all time and favorite director? I'm going to tell you right now, Laura, I don't have favorites, but I will give you a list of people that I enjoy. I like Clive Owen, Kevin Costner. We both love Denzel Washington, Paul Newman, Gene Hackman, Ryan Gosling. I like people that actors and actresses that you watch them on screen and it feels like it's very easy for them.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Where it's not, I do like some overacting, like when it calls for it.
Yeah.
But movies where it just seems very easy, like you're just kind of like, it allows you to get into the film. I like Kate Blanchett, Toni Collette, Elizabeth Olsen, Julianne Moore, Laura Linney. I don't know who are yours.
Denzel Washington.
There you go. It's just people that
I've said before that Denzel Washington, I think, is up there with Laurence Olivier as the finest actor of all time.
Mm-hmm.
He will be known for 100 years as just like a phenomenal actor just like Laurence Olivier. He's somebody who you're going to learn about in school when he retires.
Right.
And I think we're both going to have the same director. So,
well, I will say this. It's going to be Spielberg, obviously, but I wanted to give more than just Spielberg. For directors, it's like if these guys come out with a movie, I try to make sure I see it.
Sure.
So, and that's Spielberg number one all the time. The Coen brothers, Joel Coen, Tarantino, Fincher, Paul Thomas Anderson, Soderbergh, Linklater. Like when I see that they have a new movie out, I'd probably rush more to the Spielberg films than anything, obviously, even though I still haven't watched The Fabelmans and I have it. Because that's like, those become like, okay, I don't want to split up a Spielberg film. I want to sit down and watch it. Right. But when those guys have movies that are out, I'm just like, I try to like, I got to put that on the list. I want to watch that. I mean, I know it's Spielberg for you.
I think Spielberg is just a phenomenal director. And now he's getting like crapped on by people who are just like, but you can only do this or that. And it's like one thing about directors is, and I talk about this, like everybody loves Martin Scorsese. And some people say he's the best director. And Scorsese is great, but he sticks to his wheelhouse.
Sure.
98% of the time.
Sure.
Spielberg has done every genre, including now musicals with West Side Story, and everybody loved West Side Story when it came out.
That Spielberg's always
he can do anything.
He's always the person that people out of film school want to rip on, and that's fine. Go ahead and rip on him. But see, what you don't understand is that we're saying favorite director. He's probably the best storyteller that has ever lived.
Yep,
ever lived. And you may not realize that now, and when he passes away, you will realize that. But like he tells you a story. He tells you a story so much that when you watch a movie, and I've said this before, and there's errors in the film. There, the 180 degree has been broken, or there's a flub somewhere, or there's like there wasn't holding that bottle, but he was before. You don't care because you are so engrossed into the story that he's doing his job, and you're there. He uses the camera in an organic way. Watch how he sets up when he's in a scene and the camera moves from people, like it's moving amongst the people. You are that camera.
We talk about in Sugarland Express with the car scene where they're moving between the police car and the crane shot, and that was never done before.
Right.
It's awesome looking.
That's the thing. I think that he's just, because he's so big, people like to crap on him.
Yeah.
And it's like, people were doing that 20 years ago, and that's fine. You know what? Don't like him. I don't care. Don't like him. You can miss out on that because you can't give me anybody now. Even the people that I listed, you can't give me anybody now that compare to him. And the fact that he puts out a movie a year, I think it stinks. His movies aren't making money because his movies are for an audience that aren't going to the theaters anymore because of the pandemic. That's not on him. That's just because West Side Story. If there was no pandemic and people were seeing movies, West Side Story would have been a huge hit.
Yep.
A huge hit. The Fabelmans would have been a huge hit, but we're in a different world right now. And, I can go off on how the mediocrity is going to overtake everything, but whatever. But you know what? Don't like Spielberg. That's fine. Don't like it. The only thing with Spielberg I don't like is that he apologizes for older films. Like he had that ridiculous quote about how he felt really bad that Jaws came out.
No, he regretted that it had the effect of people killing sharks.
Yeah,
he didn't regret Jaws.
But I'm tired of like that kind of stuff. Like, don't apologize for your work. Just your work stands as it is.
I don't think he's saying it. He's just saying, I feel bad that it caused that effect. He's not saying, I'm sorry I put out the movie.
He better not be.
Not like Tom Hanks and all his comedy movies were like, I'm sorry I ever did comedy.
Yeah. So,
but I to add more directors, if we're going to do more than one, I think I've already talked about, like, now that I'm older, like, I think that Martin McDonagh's movies are awesome in like an actor kind of capacity. Just like watching a really well filmed stage play, and Sam Mendes, even though I don't like American Beauty.
Oh, really? That's right.
We talked about that.
Shame on you.
I just really don't like it. And I'll never watch Revolutionary Road again.
Well, that's exactly, but it's such a good film.
But it's a really good film, and any film he puts out, like, I'm gonna go watch.
That's a good one to add, Sam Mendes. No, I like that.
I don't like
1917.
Yeah.
We both like
1917 was phenomenal.
I remember watching that. I'm just like, that's the best movie I've ever seen this year. Like, I knew it. Like, that's fun. Like, when people are like, when they tell you, they give you their list of films, top 10. It's like, I don't do that because I do favorites. But when that movie came out, I was like, that's one of my favorites. I know it. You know it immediately.
Blows you away.
See, that's the thing. When people do their top 10 list and they sit down like, oh, I really like that film. Sometimes you need to watch more than once because you just don't know.
Yeah.
But after not watching 1917, I was just like, I can't. That movie's great.
Skyfall is amazing. Like, I like Casino Royale is one of my favorite films of all time. I think it's a perfect James Bond film.
Yeah.
But Skyfall is like elevated James Bond in a way that wasn't like snooty. It was just a really, really, really great film. And I watched it like over half a dozen times in the theater. Obviously, because I can watch them for free. And then a ton of
not
times
no
afterward.
more.
And I think he kind of roped into Spectre. And it wasn't like a movie, like it didn't have his heart in it as much.
Right.
But his movies are like, he's doing one about a movie theater in England, a small film that's coming out this month when we're recording it. It's probably already out. I really want to see that. The way his movies are filmed and shot are just spectacular.
Nice. So this is from Brendan Casey, fan of the show, friend of the family. Do you have a favorite scene or quote from a movie? What about a performance that's underrated? If you could reboot something, what would it be? These are a lot of questions. Yeah. If you could do a sequel to a movie that doesn't have one, what's that? All right, Butler. Do you have a favorite scene or quote from a movie?
I couldn't.
There are so many. I know.
So many. I just ended up putting Yippee-Ki-Yay, motherfucker.
That's fine.
It's close to Christmas and it's classic.
So I don't know if I've talked about this, but this is the one that's the most memorable for me. So in The Thing, when the head pops off, I think I've talked about this. So in The Thing, the movie with Kurt Russell, directed by John Carpenter, when the head pops off of the dock and it sprouts legs, as I watched this film for the first time, as that scene was happening, I actually say out loud, "You've got to be fucking kidding me." I actually said it out loud.
I don't want the character.
And then as soon as I finished, the character says like, "You've got to be fucking kidding." And I'm just like, like I was so connected with that movie at that. I was just like, I'm like, oh my God. Like it just was such a honest reaction that I was just like, I always remember that. But there are hundreds of favorite scenes and quotes from movies that we talk about.
It's just too many.
Yeah.
That your sort of reminds me of in the movie Nope that just came out.
The
aliens first appear and he's about to take pictures and he just goes, nope.
Yeah, that's just that exactly. I would just think I'm out of there.
Yeah.
What about an underrated performance?
I always talk about Daniel Craig and Layer Cake.
Okay,
because that's what I always watch before I think I told you and you thought I was crazy. But like, well, there were two. I think that and Tom Cruise and Collateral, which is why I chose those two movies in like season 1 and 2.
That's fine.
Those are two movies that before I do any kind of acting job or acting work, I will always watch before I go act.
Yeah, you mentioned that.
Because I just absolutely adore those performances. I don't know what it is about them that I just absolutely
The Cruise wasn't against the Cruise one's against type. I think that's why
it's like against type. There's and it might be because I've learned about it afterward and like started looking up how they made the movie, that the amount of background in his character. And that also taught me something about writing. And I know you've done it as well. I think when you wrote your newest book that you want to get published, you wrote these huge biographies for each character so that their actions always made sense and had a direction on where they go. And like they absolutely did that with Tom Cruise's character in the movie. And, you know, a background where he came from, that, you know, where he grew up, that he had problems with his father, that he did this in the war and he was a soldier and was this decorations and these medals. And he got caught up in the drug trade because of this. And it's just like none of that's talked about in the film.
Mm-hmm.
He mentions an off comment about his father, but then plays it off like it's fake.
Mm-hmm.
But it all informs the character. And I was like blown away by that character work. And then in Layer Cake, there's just something about the way Daniel Craig plays that drug dealer that's against type as well. He's not playing against type because back then it was before he was James Bond.
Right.
But it's just not your typical kind of crime movie. And he's not your typical kind of criminal character.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an interesting, he's a businessman working with these insane people trying to make things make sense. And just those two performances are super underrated. And I think if you've already watched those movies and you kind of shrugged them off, watch them again. What about for you?
I've got Robert De Niro in The Intern. I thought that, speaking about playing against type, I thought Robert De Niro had a string of maybe for 10 years where he's doing movies where he's like, you know, analyze this, analyze that. Meet the parents. He started doing like these comedies. But in The Intern, he is like an older man who enters the workforce.
Acting like an older man.
Right. And he's so reserved. And what's funny with The Intern, and I think it was on our list, is that that movie kind of creeps up on you. You're watching the film and you're just like, and then like an hour in, you're just like, oh, I really like this movie. Like it's so earnest and he's really good in it. And he's really low key. And it was almost like it was nice to see that he could do that almost. Sure, yeah. You know what I mean? I really love Toni Collette in The Sixth Sense because I love the scene in the car.
She's so good.
And that scene is, if you want to talk about underrated scene, like she is just amazing in that scene when he's the kid telling her about his mother,
his mom.
And she's just great in that scene. I think everybody talks about Philadelphia, and This Is Your Boy. Everyone talks about Tom Hanks in Philadelphia, and he's great. But Denzel Washington has the much tougher role in Philadelphia. He has to play the homophobic lawyer, and he has to kind of have a metamorphosis. He has to grow on screen.
Right.
And they rewarded
Tom Hanks
for a reason because what the movie's about. And that's fine.
Sure.
but they rewarded Sam Rockwell and 3 billboards with the Oscar because he plays a racist. Kind of thing, yeah. Because he doesn't really go full sympathetic, but you kind of see like his character has a change because he realizes what he is not right.
He grows up.
Right. But in Philadelphia, and I think people forget about Denzel Washington in Philadelphia because it's always Tom Hanks. So Tom Hanks is on the cover. Right. But Denzel Washington has the much harder part in Philadelphia, and he kills it. He just destroys that character, and he's great. And I think that's something that if people are going to go back to watch Philadelphia, is just pay attention to what Denzel's doing, because he has to change in that film, and that's not many actors can do that.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. So I think he's really good in that. I always love Philip Seymour Hoffman. I love him in Almost Famous because he's the guy on the phone all the time telling him how Patrick Fugit's character is uncool, and he's awesome in Charles vs. War. So, but I would say those are the performances that popped into my head. What about a reboot that you would do?
So I've got 2.
I'll go for it.
Both of us, when we were in the theater, were always talking about trying to reboot Gremlins.
Okay.
I think Gremlins would make a great reboot. Do practical effects. I think you can still do Gremlins. I think that people have an appetite for horror comedy, dark horror comedies like that.
Well, Krampus, we love Krampus. Yep.
And it became such a cult hit. And I think rebooting Gremlins correctly would be
Gremlins is a good movie though.
No,
you mean doing it right?
Doing it right now.
Right.
I think it's one movie, like there's so many movies that are classic. It's like, don't reboot them. Don't touch them.
Right.
Look at all the Jurassic Parks. Jurassic World's okay, but the 2 sequels didn't do well because it's too late for those. Sure. You can't remake a classic like that. But I think Gremlins is one that is amazing, but can still be rebooted.
Okay.
And then we talked about it on the episode, but I think The Shadow is one.
Oh yeah.
That could be rebooted, especially the way they made that darker story in The Shadow. And he's a darker hero who was a horrible villain at first. Mm-hmm. His powers are interesting. The setting is interesting. Mm-hmm. His costume is cool. Mm-hmm. I just think he's got all the makings of a superhero movie that's different, but one that could and should be remade, and especially in this time of superheroes, put something a little different out there. I think that could absolutely work.
Right. People who know me, who worked with me, I've said this constantly, so they'll know this is not news. But I've always wanted to reboot the Monster Squad. I know they're doing it. I know somebody's doing it, and that's fine. My dream dies. But my thing with the reboot is that I don't know if I would do Universal's horror, or I would try to do like Jason and Freddy. Go like the hardcore ones. I'd like to see that, but that's like a pie in the sky. That's never going to happen. But that's when I would reboot. As terms of like a sequel, and
I've got 2 for this one.
I've got 1.
Okay.
I remember. I don't know if it was you I talked with or somebody, but I remember in Tron Legacy where Clue talks about how he talks about how Clue takes over the mainframe, and I don't know if I told you this, but I always thought that would have been a great middle film, like Tron's Empire Strikes Back, where we actually see Clue taking over everything, and it just ends on a dour note and it leads to Tron Legacy. I thought that middle, I think like because it took so long for them to do a sequel to Tron, I think we missed out on that. But that would have been like, I was always like, when he tells the story, I'm just like, and they kind of show little bits, flashbacks. I'm like, I kind of want to see that movie. So that's a movie that I would have done. That's the only one I could think of. What do you got for me?
Tron 2 would have been actually a good idea, which I know I think they're kind of rebooting it. It's not a sequel, but it's not a reboot.
Whatever. Okay, fine. Sucks.
Nice Guys too.
Okay. Yep.
I like, if you can do 4 Lethal Weapons, you do 4 Nice Guys. I love Nice Guys. It's one of, in terms of like what's on the list that I had seen before that we put on here.
It's got to be the same writer director.
Yeah. Nice Guys too. And we always talk about Constantine too, which is happening now.
Yep.
I think it's because of us. we did it. We're the one that pushed them over the edge. Yes. And then I'm really sad that we never got to see Fincher's Dragon Tattoo.
Oh, right.
The Girl Who Plays with Fire. The other, like the next 2 books.
Yeah.
We got a sequel that wasn't part of the books.
I'm still waiting for Mindhunter.
Fede Alvarez. I want my Fincher's Dragon Tattoo trilogy.
That's good. That'll never come, but yeah, I hear you. All right, here you go, Butler. Hi, big fan of the pod. Love the commercials. My question is, why do you hate me? Thanks for taking the time to do this. Good luck in all future endeavors. This is from Chris Frodell from Recent Activity Podcast and Argue With Myself blog. Chris, because you suck. Okay, that's why.
We just don't like you, man.
Just teasing. I don't know why you think we hate you, but sorry, I guess.
We invited you to our Forgotten Entertainment Hangout. You didn't come.
Well, he had to work. That's fine. I get it.
Your work schedule, man.
Sorry, Chris. Well, when you ask Butler to guest on Recent Activity, you can pepper him with all those questions. Don't ask me. I'm busy. I'm just teasing. But check out Recent Activity, the podcast. They were about 38, 30. Well, at this time,
or
Well, we're
recording. They're
recording,
about
yeah.
in their mid-30s in terms of podcast episodes. So I would expect they would be probably in their mid-50s when you're listening to this. So go check them out. They're on ForgottenEntertainment.com and wherever you get your podcasts. This is from my wife. Why don't you ever give your wife credit for suggesting the movies that you cover? So this is from me, Butler. When you start staying awake for movie nights, I'll start crediting you. Also, I love you. My mother asked us why we never have a live audience. Now, we talked about that.
We had talked about doing it
Yeah.
before.
Yeah. I think it's just because.
We didn't grow that big.
Yeah. I don't want people in my basement.
Yeah. Our audience is huge. It would cause we have to get a space.
We'd have to
make sure people
it would have to be we'd have to be on stage. I think the logistics of if we're going to be talking about movies, would they have to, I think we didn't would they have to watch the film?
I think it would be like a movie watch night. I think it would be a longer thing. We'd all watch the film together, and then we'd kind of do our episode and take audience questions during.
Probably, yeah, that'd probably be interesting.
But it's just the question of who would come, could we get people to come, and where would we do it?
Right,
like you said, not in our basements.
But yeah, no, we talked about it. It just never happened.
Yeah.
I think the other thing we always talked about is having a third person who kind of produced the show to help us out.
Would have helped us.
Never happened, but not a big deal. What are you going to do? The final one is from your mother, Butler. She just writes Evolution.
So it's like we were asking for new movies for our list, which I think Evolution's already on there.
That's fine. But my note is not a question, but yes, I believe in it. And the movie is just okay.
I believe in it. My response I wrote down was, okay. But yes, we just didn't get to it. Field wasn't a huge fan. I think it's on our list, but
I wanted to like it because I love David Duchovny.
I was
but I also wanted
to. The new Ghostbusters,
I also wanted to like The Bubble because David Duchovny was in there, and I didn't like that either. So, yeah. All right. So Butler, I guess what do you got for me? Anything else? Those are all the questions. Probably should wrap this up. I think we've gone longer than we wanted to.
What was your least favorite episode we did in general?
I think, Rango.
Is it Rango? Because you were so you didn't care about Rango.
Because I think the episodes where I can always just talk about a movie. I'm joking when I say Rango. I can always talk about a film. I think it's the episodes where there's not a lot to talk about. I feel like I don't want to shortchange the readers. Jesus, I don't want to shortchange the audience.
Sure.
So I think the least favorite episodes are when we're doing quotes. I love Brain Candy, but it's just us doing quotes. I love The Nice Guys, and I think there was a lot more to talk about with The Nice Guys, but it's just us doing quotes. So when we start doing that, MacGruber. So when we start doing stuff that we really liked and we just want to do the quotes, I think that's I feel bad doing those.
Sure.
But I never really watched a film. Even if I hate a film, I can try to talk about it. Mortal Kombat. I don't like Mortal Kombat, but you love Mortal Kombat.
Yeah.
So when I think that's part of the back and forth. I may not like a film, but you did.
Right.
So if this was a solo podcast and it was just me, I think maybe I'd have a tougher time with movies that maybe I didn't dig because I'd probably be really negative. But because it was a combo podcast, it was a duo, I think we're able to go back and forth on each other. I think, and just kind of figure that stuff out on our own. I mean, I know we talked about the audience season, and that was probably I think I was more interested in that because it was movies that we wouldn't have picked.
Yeah.
So that was probably going into it, but I never really had a problem with any of the movies. When we started getting into when we're quoting about films, quoting the stuff that we love the films, I just felt like we were not being good podcasters. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Because it wasn't as interesting.
Right. I think when we first started out, we talk about movies all the time. But I think as we started doing the podcast, we started realizing, okay, we're not just talking about movies. We have to be podcasters, and we have to have
stuff to talk about and talk about them in a constructive kind of.
Yeah. We don't necessarily have a format. The format kind of came upon on its own. We did initially.
We had to read
and it was just this is stupid. But then it eventually became facts, discussion. Who would you suggest it to? Why do you think it's forgotten? I would try to do some reviews in there. I only like doing the reviews when they went against what we felt. Because I always liked that kind of just getting us riled up for it. What about you?
At least, I mean, the ones where we talk about we try to break quote fests are not great episodes, especially to edit.
Right.
Yeah. Because I'm just all right, what am I keeping here? What am I getting out? And it's
right.
Oh, what was that quote? What was that quote? But there's other episodes where it's like I didn't care for the movie as much, and I didn't really bring a lot to the table.
You felt like you didn't bring a lot to the table.
I felt like because
you're like, I'm not bringing anything.
Well, like neither of us did. Like I think Meet the Robinsons ended up being a decent episode, but I think that the message was strong, but the movie wasn't. But there weren't a lot of facts. So it's just like
that's tough to do when there's not a lot of facts and you're relying on the viewing notes.
Like, this is what's wrong with it.
Yeah,
this is what's good, and then there's no facts. It's just like this is why it's the only reason it failed. So it's like there's not a lot to talk about.
When you don't know, like I think with conspiracy theory, the last episode we did, when you don't know, you're having a problem with the writing of the plot,
right?
But you have no facts to be like, why is this not working? Like, did an executive come in? Like when you don't have that, like you want to know.
Yeah. But I think in terms of that, it worked because there's so many different things that didn't work in the movie. And for Meet the Robinsons, it was just like the story didn't work right here. And it wasn't like a whole bunch of different reasons. It was one major flaw. And I think those don't work out well. I think a lot of the movies where you didn't like things and I like things work out really well.
Well, when we go back and forth, yeah. And that was good too, because we would never tell each other before the podcast what we're going to, we wouldn't talk about that. That wasn't always like that, but I think we basically said like, don't talk about it until we get to the show.
Because it'd be like, oh, you made me watch this piece of shit.
Right.
Let's go into it.
Even when we were sharing on our stories that, oh, I'm watching this or Sizzlack watch this, feel like I try not to put anything. Yeah, I did one time, but a couple times, but because I just couldn't resist.
I think there was one movie in the last season or two where I was just like, put like eyes rolling. I put Homer Simpson sleeping.
Yeah.
Because it was so boring.
Yeah. So, I mean, I got nothing else. I mean, I think we should, unless you got more questions for me. I mean, it's over. It's done.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much it.
Yeah. I hope you enjoyed listening to us. I hope we weren't too boring. I always feel like people just don't listen to us. I don't know why. It's still a shock where people listen to the episode. I try to be as genuine as possible in terms of like my thoughts on films and what we talked about and I guess life stuff. But I mean, it's all, it's a subjective medium. So,
sure.
I say it all the time. I may like something. If you don't like it, okay, fine.
Well, that's why we say in the beginning, you never know, even if you never know, you might find your own forgotten gem.
I don't
always revisit it.
I don't like discounting another person's opinion. I don't like, we know people that we would talk to about movies and they're just like, it stinks. And it's like, that's not really, I don't want to have a conversation with that person.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'll talk about film all the time, but like, if you're just going to come at me with this sucks, why? I don't know. I just hate it. That's not a reason. And I don't want to talk to you.
I think that both of us, there are very few, like, I know both of us have movies we think just stink, outright stink. But I think you should never have like more than like 10 movies in your life you've seen that just outright suck completely all the way through.
Right.
There's always something you can find in movies that isn't bad.
Which we talk about all the time, where not every movie, not the great movie that you love, there's always one thing you don't like in there.
There's
a couple
always
things.
Gonna be a flaw,
There's things that you hate. There's stuff in it that are still decent, So you can't just lump a terrible movie and just be like, it's terrible all the way through. Nothing is ever good. Nothing is redeemable, because that's not true. Because, movies aren't easy to make.
Right. It takes a village to make a movie.
And it takes it to ruin it too. So, it's the business of making films. I've never watched a film where I was like, I think maybe one or twice where I was just like, this movie stinks. I don't care, because people are trying.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, there should never be that many movies on your list that you think that of.
Right.
There should, even the worst movies that you're like, I really don't like this movie, but I like this and this. Like, I really don't like American Beauty, which I've said over and over in the podcast.
I can't believe you don't like it.
And I don't like No Country for Old Men. Those are my big hot takes.
And that's fine.
No one agrees with me, which again is fine. It's opinion, but there's still stuff in that movie that if you're like, but this is great. I'm like, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, you just don't. Yeah.
There's always flaws in every movie, and there's always great things in every movie, with very few exceptions. You should never just discount art in general. I think
I always say too, like, I just didn't connect with the film. It just didn't.
That's also true.
That's a big thing. Like, you're being told.
It's not for me.
You're being told a story. If you're not really into the story, that's okay. But that's fine to say. So I guess if we're leaving you with anything, just try to, if you love movies, try to watch as much as possible. Try to watch movies that you wouldn't watch normally.
I think that's something we try to do in the podcast as well. Do podcast movies. Do movies that most people wouldn't put on their podcast and talk about.
Right. We would love to sit down and talk about Raiders of the Lost Ark all day and every day.
But everybody does.
But everyone does that. And that's not, to us, that's not interesting. We wanted to try to bring stuff that maybe people hadn't talked about, like the remake of 3:10 to Yuma, or like Sugarland Express, or, stuff like that, or Dreamcatcher, like stuff like that. And do movies that aren't sometimes talked about, but maybe not. Just try not to do all the popular ones. That's what we try to do. That's why it's called Forgotten Cinema. Bing. All right. So I guess that's it. I got nothing else to say. I mean, I would just keep repeating myself. Thank you for doing the podcast with me.
Thank you for doing the podcast with me.
Yeah, we had a good time. We never really argued. If we did, it was just phony baloney. It wasn't really, you know what I mean? Like we never like hated each other.
Oh yeah.
I mean, no ways talk it up. We always like get at each other on the podcast sometimes. And some of those are funny episodes, but like it was never like once the recording was off, we were just like at blows.
Yeah, because it's a difference of opinion about movies. And in terms of the workload, we split it up.
Yep. Yeah. Mike edited everything. I did all the social media stuff and promotion and engagement. That's probably going to fall by the wayside. I apologize, but, well, at least after April. But I think I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed doing it. I think I like that I was able to end it. I like stuff that has an ending, and who knows what's going to happen after this, There's just other things we both want to do.
Sure.
And I think if anything, this is a great calling card for us to have, because I know that in my job, the job I have now, one of the things was that I did podcasts and I was, in that world. And,
absolutely.
Yes, it's an entertainment podcast, but it's still the same. It's still like the same skill set pulls over to like a more professional corporate podcast.
You still got to do your homework. Right. You still got to put it together. The fact that we didn't give up. We have over 200 episodes. We made it past the 50 mark.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, to everyone else out there that's still going, keep grinding, keep doing it. If you're doing it for the right reasons, keep doing it. If you feel like you're where we were now, hey, reach out. We'll talk to you if you want us to help you out how we did it. But, don't be afraid to end something, because you want to start new stuff. That's what it's all about.
Don't be those TV shows that just go out on a low note. Have that best series finale that you can.
I'm kind of looking forward to actually watching movies, but not feeling like I gotta watch this movie tonight. You know what I mean?
I've watched a few. Like I'll record this. I'm rewatching the TV show Angel, because I've rewatched Buffy a bunch of times, but I haven't rewatched that. And every time I sit down to watch an episode, I look at my laptop like,
you want.
Should I be taking notes?
It doesn't feel right. It doesn't.
I feel like I'm cheating when I watch a movie. I'm taking notes now.
Well, no, I want to be able just to watch a movie, and not let everyone know what I feel about it. You know what I mean? Like I don't mind talking about movies, but like I felt like I was I need to tell people what I think about this, because sometimes I just don't. I'm even thinking about deleting my Letterboxd accounts, because I'm like, I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to track my movies. I just watch movies. I watch movies. So anyways, but that's it. Thanks for listening. Mike, if you don't have anything to say, I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to do a final thank you and get out of here.
I got nothing.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. Sorry this episode ran too long. Thanks for listening to the entire 4 years. We will see you again. But finally, I am Mike Field.
And finally, I'm Mike Butler.
And this has been the Forgotten Cinema Podcast wrap-up episode. Take care, everybody.